Hello, my dear Americans. My name is John, and I'm the founder of the American Autobaun Association. This is my first time as a YouTuber, so I apologize. I have a sketch of basically all the stuff I want to talk about in front of me. Basically, I'm trying to actually bring about one of the biggest changes into America that a lot of people have not taken notice of. But some of us, and basically probably majority of us, just kind of not being noticed, is talking about the one important thing that a lot of us don't get looked at when it comes down to basically our everyday life, and that is basically driving on our interstate system. However, a lot of us basically go on the roads every single day not noticing the one big thing is that it's just fascinatingly it's speed, period. And it's not taken any notice until now. So I've basically created this so-called entire organization to help get things started and getting things moving. So the problem is that a lot of the tech that we have now in our automobiles allows for these new changes to our highway system. The only downside is that most of those changes have not been made or have not been noticed. But with our car companies basically now just changing and upgrading new technology into cars, you would think the traffic laws have actually adapted to that. Problem is, in America, we are very, very slow when it comes to dealing with that. So it's time to kind of bring change to that. And I'm basically going to illustrate a lot of the things that basically we need to be focused on. So, like I said, I'm the founder of a new movement that all taxpayers can agree on. I don't care what basically party that you're basically associated with. We all are American to one and the same. We need to kind of get back to understanding that. Of course, we don't do that nowadays. There will be doubters about basically this so-called new change. But a lot of us that I've especially spoke with can basically say we need to be noticed. We are not noticed except when it comes down to being tracked down and being received with a ticket for the roads that we pay for. And I feel like that's not fair for us, because we pay for the roads, but yet at the same time, well, I'll put it this way, we all pay for the roads, but at the same time, only about a quarter of us are basically noticed. And that's when you drive on a highway or interstate every single day. It doesn't matter where you're going to work, you're traveling, you're going on vacation. That's basically seen as a factor that every now and then you're always going to be stopped by a law enforcement official. To me, I'm sorry, I don't like to put this on cops, but you're wasting taxpayers' money. I'm sorry. I have to say that. I have to get that out of there, but you're wasting taxpayers' money. Just saying. But in a benefit, the Autobahn, in the Autobahn law, can help bring change to that use of basically making, it easier for even emergency officials. And how I could say that is that you can get to your situations a lot faster. No one's in the way, especially if there's an accident on the road or something has occurred that you basically have to allow yourself to be able to pass through a lane on the highway where basically you can't pass right now because you're stuck down by a 75-mile-an-hour speed limit. It's just stupid. But getting back to, what I was saying, there will be doubters, but until we basically kind of take knowledge of what needs to be done, no one's really going to understand. And I'm going to get to that. But it's time to talk about our traffic laws in this country and what we call home. The association has a few small subscribers, not that many right now, on Facebook. I have made a Twitter page too. Haven't used it as much, but I have started that particular Facebook page for everybody who wants to basically subscribe. Meet me on there. But I'm trying to get everybody to be on board, especially for those who, more particularly of all, are interested in having to change for the Autobahn law. And I will get to that a little bit later on down in this so-called preview. But just kind of basically breaking knowledge onto a lot more of the details. The reason for the Autobahn law, and you guys, if you want to find out about it, you can go on Facebook and look up the Autobahn law. Just look up the icon in the corner of your screen on Facebook. It's exactly the same one that it is on YouTube. And I'll bring you into the details of basically understanding the history of our interstate system. The association has to do with the interstate. A lot of it has to do with our government back in the 50s after World War II. It was created by, the idea was started by Dwight D. Eisenhower. Of course, there's a lot more details into it than that. But after he was general in the Second World War, we had the interstate system. Later on, after he became president, later in the 50s, he created the Autobahn idea to the states, with the downside of the fact that it's basically been started with speed limits. Not really happy about that, and a lot of other Americans not happy. Of course, back in the 50s, not much was noticed into it, because in the 50s we were still working on detailing speed in our cars. That now has changed with the fact that we have so many different cars and so many different types of technology in our cars now that has made it a lot faster for us to have a new change to the highway system. Fortunately, our government is a lot slower than our automobile companies that basically build the cars for better use on our roads. That's just going to have to barely immediately just come to a complete change. But going to the fact that the German Autobahn brought the idea of the interstate to the U.S., it's also the fact that we basically are stuck down with speed limits, and we've been stuck with those speed limits since the 1950s. So basically, we are driving on a highway system that already was designed for speed, but yet was been held back by speed limits. So the interstate system, particularly the system that was created back in the 50s, is slowly dying because of the fact that we don't use it for what it was used for. There's been a lot of other scenarios, but the interstate system is beneficial for many reasons. One, for the starters of factors, is that it actually can bring a lot of change to the economy. A lot of people don't know this, but the Autobahn has gotten a lot of attention as far as tourist attractions. America has a really big benefit when it comes to the Autobahn. And bringing the interstate system here for the first time since 1950, okay, we can basically bring change to our highway system. The highway system, more particularly, most important of all, should just basically be removed from having speed limits, period. A lot of the factors come into place that, you know, if we're going to have the highway system, we have to kind of accept the fact that we live in using a system that basically is obsolete because we allowed it to be obsolete. It's kind of hard to basically talk about it, knowing the fact that this is the first time I'm actually discussing about it in public. This is kind of why it's kind of a little bit hard for me to kind of get into details. But I'll get better as I slowly get more down into making newer videos, into the details. But people talk about how America's the freedom and righteous country that we basically are, and the one thing that makes it that country is our roads. Our roads, surprisingly, are our main biggest attraction, and yet at the same time we don't acknowledge that into making our roads even faster. People whine and complain about, oh well, you know, the Chinese have high-speed rail. Well, you know what? We need to stop, because we already have our high-speed system. We're not using it for high speed. It's the problem. And unless we start doing that, we're not going to get anywhere, and we're going to fall further behind. We need to start taking notice into this. So basically, we have to start, unimpeding our interstate with speed limits and start focusing on more bigger priorities for our highway system. We need to basically start building new signs, making our roads built better. It's just, we need to do a lot more. Speed has very, very good benefits to our highway system. And unless we start taking notice of that, sorry for me having to deal with that, my nose is itching. We basically can bring better use to our economy. Things are getting to places a lot faster, and people would take a lot more notice into that. If we had roads that had no speed limits, we can have products sent to point A to point B a lot faster. Of course, yes, we can actually be using trains as well, planes, cargo ships, all these other things that basically we use for us to actually import and ship our products. But speed is not dangerous. And I hate when people like to say and consume speed as reckless driving. It is not reckless driving. So people who like to say that, let's just stop right now. Let's just stop calling it reckless driving, because that's exactly what it's not at all. Speed is just as important as basically any other thing that you need to do that basically involves responsibilities. The problem is, if we are consuming ourselves with doing everyday life behind the wheel, that is more potentially as reckless driving than is speed itself. Okay? So we need to stop calling speed reckless driving. It's not called reckless driving. Period. So we just need to start focusing on that. Period. Also, the thing is that also I want to bring to another attention. A lot of people also kind of don't know this. For those who are basically learning, trying to understand the Autobahn, for those who haven't heard of the Autobahn, okay, it's this so-called highway in Germany, okay? Basically, virtually has no speed limits in most of its rural locations. Of course, the Autobahn has changed since its creation a lot of times, and that's because the population of Germany has changed over time, and they've had to adapt to the population movement of what's been coming on into Germany since that time. But the Autobahn is virtually limitless when it comes to speed limits. And one thing a lot of people don't also understand is that why is there less accidents than the interstate? And a lot of that has to do with the fact that its laws, or its most biggest feat, that makes the interstate a lot more vulnerable than accidents than the Autobahn. And unless we're going to change that, we're still stuck with the same problem. So police, at the end of the day, I understand you guys have a job to do, but you're not fixing the problem. You want to fix the problem. The problem is not with speeding. The problem is with people holding their cell phones in their hand while they're chatting on the highway, people eating their food in their cars and drinking at the same time when they're not supposed to be eating and drinking in the cars, and dressing up when they actually were late, getting up in the morning and coming into work. It's, it's kind of stupid. You guys are supposed to do this stuff when you're basically sitting still or in a building when you're eating, but yet you guys don't basically do this. But you guys decide to do this in your cars. I understand America, we basically rush and we do everyday life, doing this, doing that, rushing to this, rushing to that. But your car is not your house. Let me say that again. Your car is not your house. And we need to start understanding that. Your car was never designed to be your house. It was designed to be your mode of transportation. Okay? And making more so, the so-called interstate was designed to be a speedway. It was designed for speed. Even though we are basically wasting money on it to be speedless. Okay? If we're going to fix the problem, the biggest problem, ladies and gentlemen, is distractions. This is your reckless driving. This is what I like to call the reckless driving problem, not speed. So if we're really going to actually start talking about basically getting rid and making our roads safer, getting rid of the problem, distractions, ladies and gentlemen, distractions. Let's kind of start thinking about that for a moment. Let's stop talking and driving while we're in our cars. Let's stop, while we're in our cars on the phone, excuse me. Stop basically eating and drinking in our cars while we're driving. It's kind of stupid, really. I mean, every time I'm driving around town, I always see somebody with a cell phone in their hand, and they're driving the car. And half the people have brand new cars that have phone communication systems in them. Why on earth would you even, in God's green position at all, be driving with a phone in your hand when you have a brand new car with a phone communication system in it? I mean, I can see my position. I'm driving a 2005 vehicle, 2000 year model vehicle. Okay, I can't install my phone into here because my Bluetooth system is older than what I have, what a lot of most other people would have. Excuse me. Okay, but yet I see people with brand new cars holding cell phones, holding their iPhones, holding their Galaxy S's, their Notes, their LGs, hold them in your hands. Do you guys have a phone communication system? You guys bought a brand new car, right? You guys got a phone communication system, right? Why not use it? It just makes more sense. And don't say that, oh, I don't know how to install it on there. It's pretty simple and pretty easy. Especially if for older people, you can go to the dealer. I understand you basically are not, tech smart. But then again, doesn't mean you're tech prone. Does not mean you don't go to the dealer to find out how to install the system on your car. My grandmother did it. It's simple. Okay? But for you to sit there and say, oh, well, I don't know how to use it, so I'm going to sit there and hold it in my hand while I'm driving, is utterly stupid, and it's reckless, and it's dangerous. I'm sorry. This is what I see as reckless driving. And it's stupid. And, it's also another thing that I want to take focus on as I'm getting off of that, is that the one biggest mistake that United States did, Dwight D. Eisenhower did, when he actually introduced the interstate system. And forgive me for everybody in the United States government for basically saying this, but there should be no state at all that should actually be illustrating laws in this country, especially when it's a highway system. I'm sorry. That's not, basically, it's not achievable. Because the laws in one state can be different in another state. It's stupid. And if we're going to start making ourselves a lot more smarter on handling this situation, we need to come with a new proposal that's one country, one law system. And a lot of that's going to have to start with the Autobahn law. We need to focus where the highway system is only illustrated by one system. That is the federal government's system. And that's it. No state should be telling me, oh, well, you know, you got to drive like this, and then you go to Illinois, and then you got to learn how to drive like this. And then you don't know that you broke a law. You get stopped. Half 9 times out of 10, a person may get pulled over for speed. But certain other times, you may get pulled over not realizing you broke a certain law that you never even knew existed. And a lot of that is due to the fact that states create their own laws on the roads that we don't all understand. We don't know them because we don't live there. Okay? And what? Oh, well, you're going to Google it? We shouldn't have to Google it. Because it should never be, in the first place, been made for the highway. Period. And it should have never been illustrated by one particular state, when it should be illustrated by an entire country. So we need to basically just eliminate that problem. Also, you know, I also thought about, you know, acknowledging with the DMV too. We make it very, very easy for everyone to get their hands on a driver's license. Mention now, not everybody nowadays is eager to get their hands on a car. But it is a necessity than it has used to be a long, long time ago. Probably 10, 15 years ago. Because basically we live in cities that have basically increasingly expanded. So we've potentially grown to have, more land coverage than we've had basically back 20, 30 years ago. So basically having a car now is mostly a need than it is of a want. Now, deciphering what kind of car you want, now that's basically a whole different topic. Now, I'm not really going to get into that. That's for you to decide. That's not for me. What I chose was what I loved, and that's just that. But getting to the understanding of the DMV, we make it too easy for people to get a license. That's also got to change. Germany has had it illustrated that when you get a license, you have to do a bunch of crazy maneuvers, understand a lot of laws, and understand the real meaning of what it is to drive a car. This is why Germans are basically a lot better than driving cars and getting themselves out of accidents, because they do this. Not saying that it's entirely, foolproof, but it limits the ability of accidents compared from where we stand as far as driving cars here in America, people. Just serious. People, when I drove and got my license, I was happy. I'm not taking that away from anybody. But you only learn a few things. You got to learn how to parallel park. You got to learn how to turn in a particular certain lane. And like I said, it all varies depending on state. It doesn't, vary based on the country. And the biggest problem with that is that because it varies depending on state, you basically have to understand that if you mess up on one certain part, then you fail. Like, for example, here in Indiana, a lot of people don't realize that if you're in the DMV and you're doing a driver's test, you cannot, absolutely not at all, when you are turning right, you cannot, if it's a 2-lane road that you're turning into, you do not turn in the far left lane. That is a big no-no here in Indiana. If you do that in Indiana and you're doing a driver's test, you automatically fail the test. You have to turn, if you're turning right, you turn in the right lane on that street if it's a 2-lane road on both sides. A lot of people, I've actually noticed, miss that. And when I was looking at the DMV, when I was looking at, the clipboard, basically, how they basically set up the test at the DMV, which, I shouldn't have to really explain. They'll have certain things that you got to go over before you start your driver's test. This is one of those things. So if you don't see this, you automatically fail. Now, I can actually get that, because really, you're not supposed to really turn in the left lane when you turn basically right. You're not supposed to turn in the far left lane when you turn, but yet some of us still do it anyway, because we drive the way we want to. It's your car. You drive it how you want to. But the biggest thing I wanted to get to, a reason on part why America is not really well mended with understanding the interstate, is because it's not implemented into the DMV. And because of that, we are seen as crappy drivers here in America, period. So, not all of us, but there are certain people here in our country, probably about 40-50%. Those know who I'm talking about. I don't really have to, kind of explain myself. If you basically do stupid stuff, you turn wrong way in the wrong lane and all this sort of BS, that's you. And you're not really kind of seen as a good driver. But the one thing, like I said, that basically gets me set off is that we tend to not have understanding of how to drive on the interstate. Now, people say, oh, well, driving on the interstate is pretty easy. It's not a big problem, so we don't need to implement it in the DME. Wrong. Wrong, ladies and gentlemen. Wrong. Because every single time